Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Octopus electric vehicles launch here in April. Thank you for joining me. I'm here in London talking to you on this Wednesday morning to share with you some exciting news. I'm going to give you a quick introduction, and then I'm going to be joined by the fabulous Robert Llewellyn from Fully Charged and also Dave Watson, the CEO of OMI. We're going to talk you through some of the things that are happening in the EV space and what we're up to here at Octopus EV. As we all know, we really have to tackle transport emissions if we want to hit net zero by 2050. It's a massive challenge, and we're all, and no one on this call, really motivated towards working towards that goal. Of course, the 40,000 deaths that we see every year from air pollution is another massive area which is very local and a local impact from transport. And for many, many years, it's been really hard to tackle. So as the power sector has reduced carbon emissions by about 60% since 1990 levels, we haven't been able to do much in transport until very recently. And of course, as we know, Tesla have led the way, launching amazing cars in the electric vehicle space. And now we are seeing all the other manufacturers coming up against them really fast. So last year, in Q1 of last year, I think we saw 50% of our sales with Tesla. And now it's down to about 28% as we see a lot of other brands come alongside, like Kia, even Nissan, BMW, and then even Mercedes have just launched that amazing EQS in the last few days. We are seeing these cars come out thick and fast, which is absolutely fantastic. But also the charging infrastructure is changing so quickly. With now over 14,000 you can publicly charge your car, compared to 8,500 petrol stations, not to mention the fact that many of us can do it at home, simply while we sleep, waking up each day with a full charge. And even the government are getting behind it. They've got behind it and they've said that from 2030 there will be no more sales of petrol and diesel vehicles. There might be a few hybrids for another few years, but we are working solidly towards a fully electric future, and we see now that this is a tipping point as we see our roads transforming, and it's hugely exciting. Now, despite the government getting behind it, we also saw though that they have changed the grants in the last couple of weeks and actually reduced the amount of grant that we get for our electric vehicles here in the UK, which is a shame compared to places like France and Germany, where we've seen registration skyrocket off the back of some very generous grants. But actually, also here in the UK, we do have another incentive, which is hugely exciting, but not that well known, and that's salary sacrifice. So the government has given hugely generous benefit in kind tax rates, company car tax rates for electric vehicles, as many of you on the call know. So for the last year, it's been 0%, absolutely nothing for company car tax for electric cars. As of yesterday, it went up to 1%, and then in 3 years after, it's going to be just 2%. And they've enabled us to do it through salary sacrifice. So through your gross salary, you can make a sacrifice, and in return, get the use of a brand new electric car. With that, you can even include insurance, servicing and maintenance, and generous terms for your business, so that if you resign or leave, they aren't left with that vehicle at that point. So we have, over the last year, over 100 businesses, 140 businesses in fact, making this opportunity available to over 22,000 employees. We are seeing people take it up, for example, a 20% tax rate, £1,000 contract on a Peugeot E-Version rate. Or another example might be a Tesla model for over £13,000. Huge savings, and people don't know about them. And actually, we have seen them, when people find out about them, they really want them, and they want them quickly. They want to make the most of the tax opportunity right now. So over the last year, here at Octopus EV, we've set ourselves up as a leasing company ourselves. There's a lot of what's gone into this. There are people on the call, people close brothers that are embracing low carbon green financing. There are people from the AA that are getting behind us with rate breakdown recovery services. There are a number of different service providers, Lloyd Latchford and others, that have helped us set up ourselves as a full leasing company. And actually, it's not just, that's not where it stops. So it's not just the cars where we can help our experts find you the cars and now manage all that financing as well. And we've really set up a salary sacrifice scheme, especially for employers to be able to set that up simply and easily. But also in the charging space. We've partnered now with OMI, so Dave, who's joining us later, has got smart charging technology and smart chargers that our own installers at Octopus Energy Services can now install for you. We've got obviously the smart credit tariffs from Octopus Energy, and with that you might need a smart meter. Hey, those those installers that are doing a charge point can also do your smart meter. So we're now really pulling it together. You might not have home parking though, so you might not be able to have home charging. In that scenario, we've got the electric use network. So this is a single card which gives you access to a number of different charge point operators from Osprey, Chargy, and a number of others as well to make it super simple for you. And we pull it together all in one package, the whole piece. And this new step as well in terms of being a leasing company in our own right is a massive step forward in terms of giving you that full Octopus experience end to end. And so to everyone that's been working with us to make this happen today. Now, as we looked at it, I did some research, and it turns out that 2/3 of people have never heard of salary sacrifice for your car. And that's compared to almost the other way around for work, where it's only about 1/3 of people that have never heard of it. And in fact, only 10% of people are offered EV salary sacrifice at work, compared to about 40% that offers cycle to work. So what we really want to do is to say, ask for all of your help in terms of increasing that awareness. Not for us, I don't mind who they take it with, but the fact is that drivers today are considering which cars to get. They are considering, should they get an electric car, should they get a petrol or diesel car? And the number one reason we see that they're not electric car is because they are scared. We did some research, 49% said the main blocker for them taking an electric car is cost. And if they don't know about salary sacrifice, they don't know that this is an option, then they might not make that step and go to electric. So we want to ask for your help, and in the month of April, tell as many people as possible about this amazing benefit. Again, it doesn't matter who they take it with or who they explore it with, just get the word out there that this benefit exists. Unlike with one, it's not automatically applied to every car that's taken. So we do need to really work to make sure that everyone knows about it. But we're launching a competition today. That competition, Spring into Salary Sacrifice. So this spring, you can get, if you are referring people to us for salary sacrifice, you will get points, and the person with the most points at the end of April will get the use of a brand new electric car for a year. So if you'd like to know more, go to our website, octopusev.com/spring, and there's more details there. Now, I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming our special guest to talk about this tipping point that we're seeing at the moment. And I'd like to welcome Robert. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning. Very good to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Very exciting time.
Very, very exciting. Thank you. And David, if you're there as well, we'll welcome you as well. Good morning.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Well, fantastic. Robert, I mean, you've been doing Fully Charged now for a few years. Can you tell us a bit more about that and what your experience has been and what you've seen, what changes you've seen in the market?
I mean, yes, because the increase of of cars available is the most obvious thing in the electric car market. Enormous increase in the number of cars available and from a wider and wider collection of manufacturers, and an enormous increase in the public charging network, because that is often a reservation that people are quite completely understandable. Who've never driven an electric car, they go, there's no charging network. And then I just show them the map, the ZapMap map, and you can't see the British Isles because it's just solid block of charging stations. So it has got better. It's not nowhere near enough and nowhere near perfect, but it has got better. But it's just, I think the range of vehicles that are available is a phenomenal change in the last 10 years. It really is extraordinary. And as was mentioned earlier on, the electricity that you use to power them, whether it doesn't matter what you power it with, it doesn't matter if you plug into the grid or it's your own solar panels or your private estate with wind turbines on it, the electricity you're putting into that car is hugely cleaner than it was 10 years ago, and it is getting cleaner all the time, and that is a vitally important part of the whole process.
In fact, we hit a new record, I think, over the weekend in terms of the percentage of renewables that were being generated and being put onto the grid, which is a massive achievement here in the UK, and each bit of that makes it more compelling for us to be making that switch to electric cars. What's your most standout electric car that you've driven recently?
I mean, well, I was very lucky. So yesterday we filmed the Mercedes EQS, which is there, and we still haven't really seen it because the exterior was all covered in camouflagey stuff because we were driving out on public roads. So they don't release it till next week. But I have never in my life, and I've now been in very, very many different cars from many different manufacturers. I've never been in anything remotely as ludicrously luxurious, incredible technology. So next step, so even that, okay, the heads-up display, the two things that knock me out were the buttons that operate the windows. Oh, they're just amazing. You sort of brush your finger on it, it goes, and the window goes down, and you brush it again, and it goes up. It's so sophisticated. It's so refined. The heads-up display looks like it's here, floating in 3D right in front of your eyes. It's really clear. It doesn't distract you, but it doesn't feel like it's on the windscreen, which it is. It's kind of, I don't know how, it's just, there are a lot of things about it. It's the most obscenely expensive car. It's 100% electric, all-wheel drive, very, very fast. Very, but if you drive it carefully, incredibly fuel efficient. And I really do believe it's the first car that, with a little bit of care, the way you drive it, you would be able to do 400 miles on one charge. And that is a real step forward. It was truly remarkable. But I mean, that is at the very tippy top end of the market. I mean, I think they haven't released the prices yet, but it's going to be around £120,000, €150,000 starting price for the base model. And then you can have lots of luxury extras. So very luxurious, but very impressive piece of machinery.
And do you think, I mean, 400 miles is so much compared to some of the other cars that we're seeing, and actually many cars that people are thoroughly enjoying at much lower mileage. Do you think that's needed? What's your view?
No, no, it isn't needed. I think once you're over 150 miles, and once you get used to driving an electric car, I think 150 miles is quite relaxing, because actually what 150 miles driving, it takes about 3 hours in the British Isles. That's about 3 hours driving. Well, if you drive for more than 3 hours in one go, it's not good for you. You get tired. You should get up and have a stretch. You should pull over and stop. And if you're going to pull over and stop, you may as well charge while you have a stretch, use the facilities, get a cup of coffee, whatever it is, if you're on the very occasional long journey. For the rest of the time, you'll charge that car once, maybe twice a week in normal use. So, having a car with a massive battery and a 400-mile range, there's a market for that, and there is a reason why people have that, and particularly with commercial vehicles, delivery vans and stuff. But for general use, as long as you can go over 150 miles in the winter, in the wet, when it's windy, all those things, if you can. So I'm talking a car with about 200 miles range, and that is much smaller. You're talking 40, 50 kilowatt hour battery for that is super adequate for 99.9% of journeys.
And just on the energy side, I'll come back to that. I mean, I mentioned earlier the energy tariffs that we've obviously set up, and a number of people on the call will be already familiar with them. We've obviously got the Go tariff that has our inexpensive rates overnight, but also the Agile tariff, which is following the wholesale market price. And I know that recently, I think you've been experiencing Agile for yourself.
Yeah, it is. The kind of feels like the next step. And I mean, I'm intrigued to know how long it can go on, because it just feels the advantage it gives you if you have an electric vehicle. I have solar panels, batteries in my house, and 2 electric cars. If you have that flexibility in your life, which I admit very few people do yet, but I think more and more people will begin to, so you can manage your use. So we never use, for the last probably 7 or 8 years, I've never used the grid electricity between about 4 o'clock at night and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 7 o'clock at night. I've always managed the batteries to cover that bit, so I don't add to the peak. And now I don't add to the peak because it's expensive, and I don't want to. Much as I love Octopus, I don't want to pay you that much money for my electricity during the peak times. But that's a very easy thing to manage. I don't have to do anything. It's just it's on my timers and everything. It's all set up to cover that. But then when electricity becomes incredibly cheap at night, which it's the lowest it's been for me is 0.4 of a pence per kilowatt hour for a couple of hours a few nights ago. So that is unusual. It's generally below 10 pence a kilowatt hour at night, and very often 3, 4, 5 pence. That is an amazing advantage. If you're charging batteries that you use in the day, if you're charging a car that you drive, I can't even when you can't work out how much it costs you a mile to drive an electric car in terms of fuel, then that is truly extraordinary.
No, I mean, I'm the same. And so I actually have Agile at home, and I found for the first few days when I was using it, I used to look at it quite a lot. I used to get quite excited about what was happening. And then it kind of quickly lost interest. because I had it all being managed for me. We've got Dave on the call as well. So Dave obviously has the OMI charger. So Dave, I don't know, for those people on the call that don't know what OMI is, do you want to give us a quick overview of what that does and how it works with Agile?
Okay, so OMI is a smart charging platform, and you can take advantage of it predominantly with a OMI charger or a OMI wall charger, home charger, or an OMI cable. We even have for Tesla's an OMI app that you don't need OMI hardware to take advantage of it. But what it does in principle is it figures out how much charge you have in the car, or sorry, how much battery you've left. It also figures out how much you want via your app. So as you as a user can say how much you want at what time of the day. So let's say you want it to be 80% full at 8 o'clock in the morning before you go to work. And calculates the difference in energy that's required. Then you say you're on Octopus Agile, finds the cheapest periods in the middle of the night, matches those with the amount of energy you need, creates a charging profile, sends it to the cable or charger, and then you go to sleep and the car turns on, the charging turns on and off through the night, and then just charges your car at the cheapest times. Now you can interact with it quite dynamically, as some of our drivers do, and try to optimize every single day and wait for the cheapest days. And some of the users come on and say it's going to be a windy, sunny weekend and energy prices are going to drop to 1p a kilowatt hour or negative in the weekend, and so they get excited, so they save up all of their charging for the weekend and come along and start to post about how they've been paid to charge, that they've saved all this money versus ICEs. But some people, they just want an easy life, and you can set a rule pretty much like your alarm clock and say every day I just want 80%, set it in the rule, and then when you go home and you plug in your car, and OMI just does the rest, so you don't even have to worry about it. So depending on the types of drivers and users, we have people that have optimized it in different ways. And it was extraordinary last spring when we had three compounding factors. We had sunny days, sunny windy days, so we had those two components, and we had a lower demand because of COVID. So it was kind of a flash forward to what the grid might look like in 4 or 5 years' time when we have a much higher penetration of renewables on the grid. So those periods of time, there was quite high price volatility and actually periods of sustained low prices over a period of 6 to 8 weeks. So we did a little calculation and said that if a driver we kind of created three drivers and said if they had done 50 kilowatt hours a week, 75 kilowatt hours a week, or 100 kilowatt hours a week, what would they have paid over that six week period if they had used Agile? And they would have driven 1,200, 1,800, and 2,400 miles respectively in those. So the overall cost for the person who drove 1,200 miles, it would have cost them 7p to drive those 1,200 miles. If they had driven the guy who drove 2,400, that would have cost them £3.34. So they actually saved anywhere up to, versus a petrol equivalent, that would have been £300 in fuel for that same period. So it just gives you an idea of the benefit of smart tariffs. And there's more and more of these smart tariffs appearing. I think Agile is certainly the most complicated, and there are periods of higher prices, as we've seen coming up to Christmas and winter, when we have these cold, still nights. There isn't enough of energy on the grid, and in those particular circumstances, Agile is higher, and you do have to pay something extraordinary like 10p a kilowatt hour, which is already 60% cheaper than standard variable tariffs. But I think EV drivers get used to the 5p, 6p, and even some negative pricing that they've got.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen huge savings actually. So you and I were chatting about it just the other day, which is that actually, running a petrol car, for standard miles, you might be spending, say, £1,700 a year in terms of fuel costs. Whereas actually for an electric car, it's like £170 on some of these cheaper tariffs. So actually you're saving 90% of the fuel costs. And so actually when we look at it, people, when they are getting stuck on that thinking around, electric cars are expensive because the upfront is expensive. Sometimes they're forgetting that the running costs can be so much better. And then, of course, there's this other piece that we're doing, salary sacrifice. So I think the running cost is really, really interesting. Dave, what are you seeing in terms of some of the uptake across Europe, the cables, and what kind of
I think it's been an extraordinary year. I mean, Robert touched on it there earlier on. It's sort of been kind of a tipping point in terms of, and there's been a tipping point in terms of policy. You see the UK government have accelerated, they've gone from 2035 to 2030. What that really means in real terms is instead of 3 million projected EVs in the world, there'll be 10 million in the UK by 2030. Then you've had Biden come in versus Trump. So you've seen companies like GM gone from there's no future for EV to the fact that they're now going to be the electric vehicle champion in the US. So that's a policy background. On the ground, what we've actually seen is, I would say, what I would call an EV explosion in Europe, or plug-in explosion in Europe. So just to give you some numbers, because I do tend to like them, in the US, there were 300,000 new plugins in 2019 and 330,000 in 2020. China was pretty flat at 1.3 million both 2019 and 2030. But Europe increased from 600,000 in 2019 to 1.4 million in 2020. So that's that's 2.5 times the number of plugins. We've seen some explosions in the places like Germany, where you've gone from 100,000 to nearly 400,000 in 1 year. In France, from 70 to 200,000. Even the UK went from 70 to 150,000 plugins. Now, they've been, that's been driven not entirely by fully electric. So plug-in hybrids have had a big part to play with, but a big part to play in that shift. But I think as pure EV drivers shouldn't be dismissive of that, because companies like Volvo, for argument's sake, have made commitments to go fully electric by 2025. So that's with a target of 50% plug-ins and 50% fully battery and fully PHEVs, and then by 2030, 100% electric. So they're making vast things, and I think which is even better is the mood music that comes from some of the manufacturers around profitability in the sector. Volkswagen, that sells 1 in 4 cars in Europe, has basically said they think they can make as much on a plug-in drivetrain as they can make with an ICE. So that's something that, like, even a year ago they said they couldn't make any money. They felt compelled to do it. So there's a massive macro shift occurring, and for OMI, there's in terms of demand for okay, well, they don't have as generous home charging grants, so it's not as interesting. There are many use cases for a cable that can be financed and leased with a car to go with the car. So we're seeing a lot of reverse inquiry from European companies coming to us and wanting to use our cable, but actually starting to look at the UK as a center of, I guess, excellence in terms of smart charging, dynamic utilities, and all this. This is what I think the UK has been a melting pot of innovation, and what we'll see is us exporting our innovation to Europe more broadly, into the rest of the world. So I think it is a very exciting time for the UK too, and even on the types of stuff that you're doing, the interesting financing models that Fiona and Octopus and other guys like that, in terms of trying to get those cars into people's hands cheaper, because the headline prices are still higher, but it's how do you get that total cost of use into people's hands, which includes the fuel, which includes the higher residual values and all that. So I would say, there's a lot of innovation in the UK.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Robert, what do you see as some of the larger challenges that we're facing in EVs now?
I mean, it's certainly, as David said, I mean, it's the most common thing we hear now is, I'd love to have an EV, but they're too expensive. So, which is extremely understandable. And the other one is, I don't have anywhere off the street to park a car. I have to park it on the street, or, and where can I charge it? Those are the two main excuses, which is interesting, because 10 years ago it was, they're rubbish and you have to throw the batteries away after 3 years, because Mr. Clarkson said that, and there's nowhere to charge them, and anyway they're just running on coal. So we've moved on from that. And I think I do actually think it's an important point to make, that the sort of smugness of those of us that use an agile tariff, have electric cars and can charge them cheaply, what we're actually doing is helping the national grid. I mean, I had to be reassured by the engineers that run the national grid. The reason electricity is cheap at that time is to encourage people to use it, because it helps them balance it. So it isn't entirely selfish. It feels entirely selfish when you're doing it, but I mean, it does actually benefit the maintenance and the ease of running the grid. I mean, having big spikes and dips for the national grid to manage is extremely expensive and painful and difficult, and that's a hard thing to do. And the more we can get it to go like that, the better it will be. But I think that clearly the challenge is we're still really talking about new cars, and it took me a while to remember I didn't buy a new car, in fact lease a new car, until I was in my mid-50s. When I was in my 20s and 30s, which is a lot of the people we're hearing from who would love an electric car, I had 10th hand cars. I had rust bucket things that I got for 50 quid that I tried to fix, and they all fall to bits, and it cost me a fortune to run them, because you had to maintain them all the time. And I think once there is a really big second-hand electric car market, which is going to be another couple of years, that you can buy a reasonable second-hand car for a reasonable amount of money, the one good thing is they'll be much more reliable than second-hand petrol and diesel cars, which are I've forgotten how unreliable cars used to be. Old-fashioned cars. That's all every car I ever had. What did it do most of the time? Break down, not work, have just loads of stuff going wrong that cost money to fix.
Yeah, I agree with that second-hand car thing, Robert. Again, another stat which I was only recently made aware of. In the UK, there's 8 to 9 million cars sold every year in the second-hand market. We're about 2.5 million in the new car market.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah.
It is a phenomenal. Just in terms of size, it's 4 times bigger, or three and change times bigger than the new car market.
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, Fiona, it's a terrible baby boomer thing to say, but when I drove that car yesterday, I could probably buy 3 of my houses when I bought my house many years ago for the same cost as that car. I mean, they are insanely expensive things. I mean, and I think the other big change, which I'm hoping that the next generation will understand, is it's a stupid thing to do to own a car in a way. I mean, to own a car, to buy a car and own it, because we don't use them very much. My cars, and I probably drive above average than most people, but my car's dormant for 90% of the time. It's not doing anything. So I think the other aspect of electric cars is the vehicle to home, vehicle to grid notion, which is the next step. But I mean, we don't have to talk about that now, but it would be great to have an expensive thing that you own a bit more useful than a stupid car that's just parked out on the street doing nothing for most of the time.
Well, I was just about to say that 90% of not doing anything is actually an advantage when one wants to look at balancing the grid.
Hugely, yeah, hugely.
So we're working on a number of projects now with the system operator and the DNOs as to how that can be utilized. And I would say even in the last 12 months, given the real life data that they're seeing, they can see the benefit, and those initiatives have also been accelerated. So that will provide more value to the vehicle owners, which will make EVs even cheaper in the futures and help that affordability issue again.
Yeah,
we've been running the vehicle to grid trial, which a number of the other joiners in the call are familiar with, the power loop trial. And on that, we now have over 100 participants that are signed up that are using their vehicle to grid chargers basically to charge up overnight and then support the grid during peak times. In fact, I think we're down to like the last 20 spaces on that. And the team, so we're really looking to kind of wrap up there and then really, test out different things, as you're saying, David, with the system operator, with the grid, and really demonstrate that proposition. And I think we're beginning to see other manufacturers now talking about vehicle to grid with CCS, which is the key thing that will really unlock that more broadly, because it's very niche at the moment with the charging chargers that do it. That's one of the key challenges. And I think to your point, Robert, we're definitely seeing that in terms of car ownership as well, where people are, the technology is moving so quickly. I think what you were describing with the EQS earlier just reminded me of that, where it's really like the mobile phone revolution, where, every 2 years you'd get a new mobile phone and it'd be completely different data, and different camera, and everything would move on so quickly that actually maybe you don't want to buy one for 10 years. Maybe actually you can get one and then change it within 2, 3, 4 years, get the new one. And then that also feeds that second-hand market that you're saying. So that's really important. We see those new cars coming through because, with only there being only 30,000 of whatever new cars, new EVs hitting the road 3 years ago, 2 years ago, that's all there is now in terms of that second-hand market. So we need the new cars to have that second-hand market. There's a number of people from the industry, and one of the things we look at is residual values and what that car is going to be worth in 3, 4, 5 years. And so in that scenario, one of the questions is whether or not there could be a manufacturer, for example, a Chinese manufacturer that might bring cheaper EVs that might then supersede some of the EVs that we have today, for example. I mean, have you seen any hints of that? Do you think there's other manufacturers that we might see arriving in the UK? Robert's eyes light up.
Yes, I think it's extraordinary that there's a kind of distant rumbling cloud that I think all the European and North American manufacturers are very aware of on their horizon. I mean, it is something that we're getting more and more aware of because we're very lucky to have a Chinese correspondent. We have Elliot Richards, who lives in Shanghai, who's married to a Chinese woman, has a beautiful baby boy, and he is doing test driving of Chinese cars for us. And there are so many. The most recent episode, which we put out yesterday, I had never heard of this car or anything to do. It's actually made by Geely, who are a huge company that own Volvo and Polestar and many other brands, absolutely enormous. And this is a new brand of theirs. And it's a really, very, very competent, extremely fast sort of performance car. It's knocking on the door of the Porsche Taycan in terms of performance, but it's going to be a quarter the price. And so that sort of challenge that is coming from China is extraordinary. And at the moment, the cheapest, so there is you can buy it's a 2-seater, very small car that doesn't go terribly far, but it's around £4,000 new on the road in China, slightly less than £4,000. Now, clearly, if that comes to Europe, which they have plans to do, it's going to be more than that, but it's going to be well below £10,000. And it's a really adequate little car, because I've just been criticised for using the term city car. Apparently, that's it's a bad term. But, for a car that you're not intending to drive to go skiing in the Alps. I don't know. I've never done it, but I know people do. But for day-to-day running around, it does like between 70 and 100 miles range in a city is super adequate, super cheap, but it's small. It's a two-seater thing.
Really easy and quick to get around, and just simple. Game changer cars. We've got a few more minutes. If there are any questions, I can see some of the questions are coming through.
There's so many.
Loads of comments. So thank you for the comments and the conversation. I think there was a really great point there, co-charger, around the 100 deaths a day that we are seeing. Yeah. Where's the urgency? We sometimes talk about that in terms of, if our water sanitation systems, if our water systems were killing 100 people a day, there'd be an absolute national uproar. Yeah. But yet our roads are doing something similar, and we're not. There is no national uproar. So I think my perception of this has always been, without good alternatives, there hasn't been, a way of us really seizing the day and fixing it. And people would all want to be able to get from A to B. They want to be able to go and see their family in other places. They want to go on holidays, those kind of things. So they wouldn't make that change. It was a sacrifice people were willing to make. But actually, now that we do have alternatives, it does feel like there should be more urgency to save those lives.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, I think the two things that I'm always very aware of, Ella Kitty Deborah, who's the little girl who died of a chronic asthma, who lived near the South Circular Road, and her asthma attacks linked absolutely to the hour to spikes in air pollution from local traffic. And you hear a story like that, I mean, it just is absolutely heartbreaking. And there is a connection. And no matter what the fossil fuel industry have said about clean diesel and how much cleaner their new engines are, you're burning a toxic material, and you're releasing toxic gases. It's not a good idea. I think I think it's time we move on. I don't know what else to say about it. What are the alternatives? We've got the alternatives, and then particularly with public transport, buses, trucks, delivery vans, all that, they're all going to be electric, I think, far sooner than the mass of the private car market. And that's really, really a good thing if you live in the city. But I mean, it is a very, very key point, and it's the thing I've always banged on about. It's the air pollution. People say, well, my diesel does 65 miles to the gallon. Yeah, I have to breathe in what your diesel does, and I'm not happy about it. And it is a bit like smoking. These same arguments are used by the same lobby groups about smoking, about asbestos, about unleaded petrol, about catalytic converters. They fought against those for years and years to delay it. They know they're going to lose, and the same thing is happening with fossil fuels now. And we've got to stop burning fossil fuels in machines. We don't have to stop extracting and using fossil fuels as long as we don't burn them. There's lots of useful things come out of fossil fuels, but burning them in combustion engines has got to. I just hope I live long enough to see the demise.
Right, and I think, it looks like you will with the rate things are going. So, I mean, I am going to wrap up and just say thank you so much, Robert. Thank you so much, David. Thanks to everyone who has dialed in today and has been watching and participating in the chat. For those of you that did join late, my kind of entry conversation was just around how we have now set up as a full end-to-end leasing company. And you can get your car and financing. We specialize in salary sacrifice for employers and made that super simple for employers to set up so that we can unlock that for many, many people. But we can also now install with the Octopus Energy Services team both the charge points and the smart meters that you need to unlock that smart charging at home. And of course, we've got the EV tariffs as well. So do join us. We've launched a competition to try and raise awareness for salary sacrifice. 2/3 of the UK, at least, that don't know about it, another 20% that have heard about it, but they don't really know the details. And unless they do know the details, they won't really realise that there's a really great opportunity to get an electric car at a lower cost than the petrol or diesel equivalent that they're considering. So help us on that journey over the next month, spread that awareness, and let's help people get into clean and green cars. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you.